You're listening to the Law of Attraction Radio Network.
Welcome to Manifesting Your Dreams. Join renowned Grammy Award winner, jazz pianist, and Amazon #1 best-selling author John Novello each week as he uncovers the secrets of the invisible architect, the quantum intelligent energy that permeates everything, even us. Discover how to tap into this inner power to use it to design the perfect life you deserve. The invisible architect, as within so without, is your guide to achieving your dream life. And now, here's your host, the jazz philosopher, John Novello.
Hi, everybody. John Novello here, the jazz philosopher. Welcome to my Invisible Architect, As Within Without weekly radio podcast on the incredible Law of Attraction Radio Network, which I'm so excited and honored to be on. I really am. I know a long time ago that true enlightenment is really only achieved through service with others and with God. So the first part of this lifetime was inspiring others through my God-given musical talent, composing and performing. I never figured in my twilight years I'd be helping others as a spiritual servant and messenger of the Creator of all, who I have named the Invisible Architect, which is discussed in my book, The Invisible Architect, How to Design Your Perfect Life from Within. But nevertheless, here we are. And so welcome back to all listeners, especially a big welcome to all new listeners. I really appreciate you all. My vision is to significantly transform the quality of your life by raising your frequency towards the God frequency, the quantum intelligent energy that is responsible for all creation, which permeates everything. And I can think of no better guest to have a discussion about this divine energy, best known as God, the New York Times bestselling author of the Conversations with God series, Neale Donald Walsh, who, in my opinion, has done more to not only remind us of our existing relationship with God, but to also help us interact with God and create better lives than probably anybody on this planet. Neale is an actor, speaker, screenplay writer, and the author of 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. His titles include 9 entries in the Conversations with God series, 7 of which made New York Times bestseller list. Book 1 remained on that list, I believe, for over 134 weeks. His works have been translated in 37 languages and have been read by millions of people around the world. Neale's latest book, God Talk, Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power, will help you see that you really are having conversations with God all the time. By the way, I just got done reading that book, so thank you for sending me that promo copy. Fantastic. So Neale, welcome to the show. How are you and God doing today?
No, I'm having a wonderful day. Thank you for asking. I'm having a wonderful life, and I've been very blessed, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this time with you. How can I serve you?
Well, I would like to start out by saying, in a sense, we share similar God stories in that we both had a divine experience with God that totally changed each of our lives. If I may tell mine quickly and then get into yours. At 3 years old, I was sitting in the living room with my parents, and you'll, given our respective ages, know this. My parents were watching the Lawrence Welk Show. You remember that?
Yes, I sure do.
So we've just both dated ourselves, unfortunately, or fortunately, as that case may be. I was only 3 years old, and I'd got our TV, and I was sitting there pointing. Myron Florin, the accordion player, just came on, and he was playing. And I saw the keyboard, and a voice out of the blue, first time it ever happened. Of course, I'm only 3. Talked to me is just like you and I are talking. And it said, point to the keyboard, point to the accordion. So little 3-year-old kid pointed to the accordion. My parents looked at each other and figured that I wanted to take accordion lessons, which was funny. It really wasn't. I just saw the keyboard, maybe a past life thing, I don't know. But anyway, a few years later, they started on me accordion lessons. I eventually transferred to the piano and the organ and ended up with this most incredible musical career in jazz. Got discovered by a famous producer, et cetera, et cetera. None of that would have happened had I not heard that first voice that told me to point to the keyboard. And then, of course, since then, I've been hooked up and blessed with this inner voice that I didn't know was really God until later on as I started interacting with it. And you have a similar story. Yours happened later in life. I believe initially in 1992, was it, when you were kind of frustrated and writing letters and venting your frustration, not really expecting an answer, and then something amazing happened, which literally changed your entire life. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about that?
No.
No?
I just,
Okay.
I just wanted to know where you would go with the conversation.
No, it's fine. I can go anywhere you want.
I'm only having fun with you. Yeah. Yeah,
Now I already know you have a sense of humor, so I can show mine now. But
yeah,
even though I know it, I would like to have my listeners hear it from you in 2025.
well, I was going through a very difficult moment in my life, John. I had lost my relationship with my uh, beloved wife, and we didn't part with angry, vindictives. We were, we just came to a quiet, gentle agreement that, our relationship simply wasn't working the way we had hoped it would. So I said to her, sweetheart, how about if I just move out and give ourselves a chance to, see if a trial separation might help us come to clarity about where we wanted to go from here. So we both agreed that I would do that, and I left the house. I felt very sad because I had 2 children with her, and I really loved her enormously. I do to this day, by the way. She's still with us, and we've remained good friends through the years. But anyway, uh, here's the story. 5 days after this relationship ended, I lost my job. The
Wow.
corporation, wow is right. The corporation that I was working for decided that it needed to downsize. So I didn't lose my job because I was not performing well. In fact, quite to the contrary, I have to say. My boss at the time wrote me a glowing letter saying the only reason they had to let me go was for reasons of seniority. I was the most recent person they hired, so I was the first person they had to let go. Seniority rules in cases like that. But he wrote this wonderful letter of recommendation saying, this man performed extremely well for us, and he's the last person we want to let go, but seniority required us to do so. So I had this letter of recommendation. I thought, well, okay, fair enough. I'll find a job somewhere else with a letter like that. It'll maybe take me a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but I'll find some work. But as if that weren't well enough, 2 weeks later, I'm driving down the road to find a job. I'm heading to a job appointment, an interview. I was being interviewed for a job. I'm certain I'm going to get the job because they're looking for someone with my qualifications. And I had this glowing letter of recommendation. I never got to the appointment. An elderly gentleman, 85-year-old guy, decided that he was going to make a left turn in front of my car. He misjudged the distance between our 2 cars. I wasn't driving rapidly. I was only going 25 miles an hour, but he misjudged the distance between our 2 cars. He smashed right into me, and I wound up.
He hit you.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, he did. Did he ever? And he totaled my car. My car was totally demolished, and I wound up with a broken neck. Now this all happens within the same 14-day period from the time I, lost my relationship. So I had 3 interesting events within the same 2 or 2.5 week period: losing my relationship, losing my job, and losing my health. I emerged from that car wreck, John, with a broken neck. And
Most people don't recover from a broken neck.
No kidding. It wasn't a hairline fracture. I can recall the wording on the medical report to this day. It said that I had suffered a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. In other words, I had a break in my neck large enough to put a pencil through.
Wow.
And the doctor said to me when I woke up at the hospital, most people do not survive this kind of an accident. They die instantly because of spinal cord complications.
And
If
you
they don't,
probably were in traction, right?
yeah, and they said if they don't die instantly, you wind up at least paralyzed from the neck down.
Mm.
Mr. Walsh, you have suffered neither consequence. He looks at me and he says, what do you intend to do with the rest of your life? Because you've been given a miracle here. He said, I've been in this emergency room for 27 years and never seen anything like this. You shouldn't even be alive.
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, fair enough. I've been given a new lease on life. But now, I'm in my little flat that I had rented with an agreement with my former wife. So I'm living in this flat, but I couldn't get a job anywhere because I'm wearing a Philadelphia collar. That's a
Wow.
plastic collar that you wear that holds up your neck. I mean, I should say it holds up your head because your neck can't no longer perform its function. And the doctors decided they didn't want to artificially just put something in that. They wanted my neck to heal organically, but that would take, a few weeks. In the meantime, no one would hire me. And finally, after going through 5 or 6 interviews, the 7th guy to interview me said, Mr. Walsh, I got to be honest with you. He said, well, nobody's going to hire you with that therapeutic device around your neck. I mean, because we all are very clear that you're still injured from something, and one wrong move while you're on the job, and we're paying your medical bills for the next 5 years. We can't afford to hire you in that condition. Come to us when you're fully healed, and we hire you in 30 seconds. You got all the qualifications we need. So I couldn't get a job anywhere. That resulted in my landlord finally having to evict me because I couldn't keep paying the rent. I didn't have like $80,000 in the bank. I had a few grand, but not a lot.
Right.
And when I finally ran out of my savings, I had no money left. I couldn't pay the rent. I asked the guy to give me a break and hang on to me for a while. And he said, I can't do it, man. I depended on that income to keep me going. So I have to ask you to leave. She evicted me. I'm now living on the sidewalk. I have no place to go. And I didn't know where I was going to live. So I thought, well, I can do this for a couple of bad weeks or a month or so. I can make this work.
Is this in Oregon?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wound up living on the sidewalk for 2 weeks shy of 1 year.
Wow.
Call it a year on the street. Sleeping on the ground, going from person to person with my hand out, asking for maybe a few coins, whatever they could spare. And I realized that, I realized how totally without any dignity a person living on the sidewalk has. Because, like, where do you use the bathroom? You have to sneak into restaurants and hope they don't spot you. And the manager inevitably realizes that you're a street person. You smell to high heaven. You haven't had a shower in 6 weeks. Your hair is down the middle of your back. And you've been wearing the same clothes. So the manager of the restaurant generally spots you. And I had this experience where the manager will say, no, don't make me call the police. Just leave the restaurant. We don't want you panhandling the customers. I said, no, I promise I won't ask anybody for a penny. I promise you, my word of honor. Could I just use the toilet? Please. I have nowhere to go. And so they would maybe, in a moment of charity, say, all right, in and out. And that's how I lived for a year of my life.
I didn't know it was that long. Wow.
Yep, 2 weeks shy of 1 year. And so I finally got a little part-time job somewhere. Some guy gave me a break. He said, okay, he hired me as a weekend fill-in for a full-time employee who wanted to give weekends off. So he gave me a little weekend job. I wasn't earning a lot of money on 2 days a week, but I did earn enough just to afford a little one-room flat on top of somebody's garage. And at least, oh my God, I was out of the weather. And it actually had a bathroom. I could even take a shower. Oh my God, it was luxury, luxury.
That's like a religious experience in itself, going from where you were to that. Wow.
So when I got up one morning at 4:23 in the morning, I realized I was wide awake, and I was awakened by my anger. And I had a yellow legal pad on the coffee table in front of me. There was no bedroom, but this really was a one-room flat. It was just a one open space room. It did have a couch. It had a coffee table. It had a bathroom. It had a little kitchenette area where you could get a little small refrigerator. So a person could survive, but it wasn't what you'd call luxury. And I'm sitting at this coffee table and writing an angry letter to God because I thought, I'm trying to get my anger out. So, I was just, dear God, what does it take to make life work?
Mm-hmm.
What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? Am I such a horrible human being that I'm paying for it even before I die? What? Tell me the rule. I remember writing, tell me the rules. I'll play this silly game called life. Just give me the rule book. How does it work? And that's, John, when I heard a voice. The voice felt so real to me that I turned around. There was nobody else in the room. I thought somebody had snuck into the flat. But of course, there was no one there.
Exactly.
But the voice said to me, Neale, do you really want answers to all of these questions? Or are you just venting?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, yeah, you think? Yeah, I'm venting.
Yeah, right.
But if you've got answers, I'd sure as hell like to know what they are. And this voice said to me, you know what? You are sure as hell about a lot of things. But wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? So I'm writing, okay, what's that supposed to mean? And the voice said to me, take down everything I'm telling you. So I thought, okay, fair enough. So I was given answers to all the questions that I had asked. And that brought up other questions, which brought up other answers, which brought up other questions, which brought up other answers. And before I knew it, I was involved in an on-paper dialogue, which I chose to call Conversations with God because of the nature of the answers that I was receiving. They were answers that I never would have believed, that contradicted everything I had been taught about life and about God. So I continued having the conversation for days on end. This went on for weeks. I was having this on-paper dialogue with God every day.
So I have a question, and that you sort of answered it. So you didn't at all start thinking it was your imagination or your inner thoughts because the answers were so unlike anything you would have dreamed up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
I really felt convinced from the very earliest exchanges, my gosh, I'm having a conversation with God.
Oh,
I mean, because of the nature of the answers that I was given
exactly.
and the nature of some of the statements that were being made, that violated and contradicted everything I had been taught since I was a child. So I just kept on, asking questions until I wound up asking questions about every topic I could think of, really. Sexuality, relationships, right livelihood, even right down to diet, exercise. I mean, children, parenting. I asked questions about parenting. I asked questions, everything I could think of to ask, until I had pages and pages and pages of dialogue. And then I was told, because of course, it never occurred to me that I would ever show this to anybody.
Right.
It was just I was experiencing it as a very private encounter in my life. But at one point in the dialogue, I was told you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And I thought, yeah, sure. First of all, no one's even going to publish it. No one's going to publish a book because a guy claims he's talking to God. It's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And even if somebody did publish it, nobody's going to buy it. People aren't going to go out and rush out to buy a book because a man claims that God's talking to him.
Especially way back then, right?
Yeah. Well, in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent the book. I actually went to a Xerox place and had my pages of handwritten notes Xerox, and I sent them to a publisher on a dare. I was daring God. I said, okay, show me. Yeah.
Now that brings me, because I'm an author and I know the difficulty in launching a new book, especially a new author with no prestige, altitude experience. It's very difficult to get it even to a publisher. Most of it's non-solicit, you can't do it. How did God help you in that area as far as who to send it to and open the door for you? I'm curious.
Well, I guess one could say God helped me. I didn't experience it that way. What I did was I went into a bookstore and I went to the self-help section to see who publishes books that are self-help.
Right.
And I found 3 or 4 books in there, and I turned the first few pages and I got the addresses because every book has the address of its publisher.
Right.
And I found a couple of small publishing houses, Hampton Roads being one of them. So I wrote down the name and address of the publishers of the books in the self-help section. Then I sent my handwritten notes, which I had Xerox, as I mentioned a minute ago. I sent them to, I think it was 2 or maybe 3 publishers that I had found in the self-help section of a local store.
And that's unsolicited. You just did it on your own.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's pretty amazing because most of these guys won't even accept unsolicited material. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I'm dumb. I'm just naive. I just went ahead and sent it to the publisher, but I wasn't sending it to like Putnam or Random House.
Right.
I was sending them. These happen to be small, independent publishers, and maybe they're not quite so rigid about what they are willing to at least open up. And so, one of the publishers, Hampton Roads, the guy actually opened the envelope and he saw these handwritten notes. It was sent him in a manila envelope. So he thought, this is interesting. Who would send me a bunch of handwritten pages? So he told me later, he read the first few pages and he thought, this is fascinating stuff.
And unique as hell.
Sure enough, about 2 weeks after I sent it to him, he called me. I had my telephone number, of course, in the book on the first few pages of my notes. And he called me and he said, we're going to publish this. I said, you're kidding me. And he said, no, this is a great work of fiction about a guy who has an angry conversation with God. And I said, no, wait a minute. You're not publishing it as a work of fiction. This is not a work of fiction. Now the publisher says to me, Mr. Walsh, are you trying to tell me you think this actually happened to you? They thought that I had made it all up. I said,
you thought you were a fiction writer, a novelist or something.
Yeah, that I had sent him my notes as a novel way of getting him to read, what I had to submit.
I didn't know that part of the story. Wow.
I said, no, this actually happened. He said, well, okay, we can put it out as a nonfiction book, but you're not going to find 500 readers because people are not going to rush out to buy a book by a guy who claims that God is talking directly to him. So, he was right. We didn't find 500 readers. We found 5 million.
I know, that's what I heard. Wow.
I'm not bragging, just saying that's what happened. And that's when I realized, okay, this is proof enough to me.
I would think so.
So the book wound up being translated into 37 languages.
I remember when it came out, and I think I listened to the audiobook first.
Yes, yes. After it sold a couple of million copies, we wound up turning it into an audiobook. And a wonderful guy named Ed Asner, a wonderful actor, Ed Asner,
I know him, remember him, yeah.
and a wonderful actress named Ellen Burstyn, they agreed to do the voice of God. I insisted that the voice be both male and female
Yeah,
because I didn't want God to be identified as one gender or the other. So Ellen, Ed, and I dropped into a studio and did the recording. Ellen did it from remote.
mm-hmm.
But Ed and I were in the studio together, and we did the recording of the first Conversations with God audiobook. And that's what happened. And I couldn't believe it. But the events were rolling out faster than I could follow them. And before I knew it, I was sitting in the studio in Chicago with Ellen, with Oprah, because she had invited me to come in and talk about what she called her favorite spiritual book of all time. So now I'm doing national television shows. Ellen had me also and on her show, and then I was doing, before I knew it, I was doing Larry King Live. Larry King said, this guy claims to be talking to God, so it was just controversial enough for him to do a show on it.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I wound up doing these national television programs. And again, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying this is what happened. And events were occurring so rapidly that I couldn't believe it. But, life is what it is. And then, meanwhile, the conversation continued. And the small-time publisher that originally put the first book out, Hampton Roads, sold the book to the Putnam people in New York, because Putnam, of course, they were tracking the sales, and they realized something was going on here.
Exactly, yeah.
So they bought the book from Hampton Roads, and then they put the first book out in an international edition.
Right.
And that's the beginning of a story that included other books in the dialogue series until there were 9 books in all.
Right.
3,000 pages of dialogue.
Absolutely amazing story. Congratulations. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I just got done reading God Talk. Thanks for the promo copy. And in God Talk, I want to move on to this. You mentioned there's an energy within us that magnetizes things to us. In fact, you say nothing comes to us unless we draw it to us, whether consciously or unconsciously, actively or passively, etc., which is very appropriate for the name of this radio network, The Law of Attraction. And my podcast is As Within, So Without. So explain a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, I meant exactly what I was told. That information came to me in my conversation with God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly what you just read, which is that, life is nothing more than energy in different forms. My particular form is called a human being. Some forms are called tigers or elephants or seals or whales. Some forms are called trees or blades of grass, or entire planets or solar systems. But all of life is simply energy in different forms. And I was told in my conversation with God that energy attracts other energy.
Exactly.
And so that's came to be my understanding. And I was told in conversations with God that how I can use my energy to attract other energy is through a process called metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told quite simply that as you think, so will you attract. So that I became very cognizant of the thoughts that I was holding. And I began to learn how to use my thought as a magnet to attract similar energetic expression.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what's that famous phrase? As a man thinketh, so is he, right?
Yeah, yes.
Exactly. Uh, there's another section, and this brings us to a conundrum that I know that you have some thoughts on. You talk about how to understand God's messages in 3 steps. God's messages are always in our best interest. They always carry positive, loving energy. And God would never send a message to anyone instructing them to hurt or injure another person. I forgot what you call those, the 3 laws or the 3 filters, whatever. But I think you grew up Catholic. I did too. And that begs the question of how the God, as described in the Bible, no disrespect intended for listeners, is purported to have killed over, if you add it up, 2.5 million people, not counting Noah's Ark and the flood. If you counted that story, it's like over 20 some million people. And it doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work. God cannot be love or pure love and follow those 3 tenets that you were told about. So that means, that begs the question, that can't be true. That's got to be fiction. These guys that wrote this down, I just wanted to know your thoughts about that.
Well, I've come to understand that human beings are a very unevolved species. We're still, relative to other species in the cosmos, we're still relatively barbaric and uncivilized. We have an uncivilized civilization. We call ourselves civilized, but we've had, we've had armed conflict on this planet for all but 5% of recorded history, and we're still trying to solve our problems to this very day. We can't do anything apparently to stop the war in Ukraine.
Right.
We have a man named Vladimir Putin who feels that he has to conquer, or I don't know where he feels the end of the war is, but because of a border dispute, because human beings can't find a way to bring an end to a borderline dispute. Where is the borderline between our 2 countries? Without killing thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the process.
I think he thinks he's Napoleon. Who knows?
Well, it's the way it's, and I'm not making Mr. Putin wrong, because we've been doing this, as I said, for all but 5% of recorded history. It's just the way human beings resolve their conflicts. We kill each other when we can't find a way to force another person to agree with us. And so it's going on right now in the Gaza Strip. So it's not just about Vladimir Putin. It's going on all over the world.
Exactly.
And individuals do it as well. We call those individuals criminals. When they do it as an individual, we call it criminal behavior. When we do it as a nation, we call it a justifiable war.
Yes, war. Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting, because if you think of the process, I don't know what your thoughts are on reincarnation. You mentioned it in your book in a different way. Where did I find that? My notes. The idea that when our physical body ceases to function, our entire self also ceases to exist is fiction. And we come back and pick up these bodies. You would think, given what you said about 5%, that we would go back to the afterlife, do a little review, learn some lessons, or remember who we really are. Like when you said, we're not really growing anymore. We're trying to remember who we are, our perfection. There isn't anything really more we have to be, do, have, if we can remember who we are and walk towards our divinity. You would think that coming back each time and going over and coming back, that 5% would change and we would learn something, don't you think?
One would hope. But the challenge is that the mind functions differently than the soul. And the mind of humanity feels, apparently from evidence all around that I see, the mind apparently feels that our objective is survival. The mind will do anything to survive, anything it feels that it has to do, including killing other people.
Well, that sounds like the instinct of an animal.
Yes.
Total job is to survive, as
Yes.
compared to a human who could think a little bit above that. I'm wondering why we can't do that.
Because we haven't learned yet. We haven't evolved to the stage. As a species, human beings have not evolved to the place where we see that we do not have to do whatever it takes, including killing other people, in order for us to survive. That survival does not require bestiality. Survival does not require cruelty to others. Getting off the topic of killing others for just a moment, I've said things, and I've been cruel to other people in my life. I've said things and done things that were simply outright cruel.
Ditto.
Hopefully I haven't done so in recent years, but in my younger years, because even though I thought I understood that there is life after death and that survival is not the major issue, nevertheless, I found myself, even in individual discussions with another person, discussions that turned into what you would call arguments. I felt I had to win the argument.
Right.
So, I couldn't even get out of that limited experience of needing to survive. I need to survive this discussion by winning the argument. And so I would say things that were cruel and unkind and sometimes even not true in order to win the argument. Only when I had my conversations with God, only when I could look back on my behavior in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, could I acknowledge to myself that I had behaved in that way, even when I knew better.
Right.
I nevertheless behaved in that way. And so only after my conversations with God did I manage to reduce the number of those behaviors. I still haven't eliminated them completely. I still catch myself saying cruel things.
Yeah.
To people I love. The other day I said something that was not very kind to my wonderful spouse of 17 years. We've had a wonderful 17-year relationship, and I caught myself saying something in a moment of disagreement. She's standing in the kitchen, and I said something and immediately regretted it. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I didn't really mean that." That just came out of my mouth. So you know what? We're simply not evolved enough to stop ourselves from behaving barbarically.
Yeah, which means we haven't walked into our divinity yet, which brings me to your concept of duality and oneness. We are both human and divine. Given our just conversation, it seems like that the human side of us is still taking over the divine part of us, because if we walk further into our divinity and who we really are, we should be able to rise above that. But like you said, we're not. In my first, I've lost two wives this lifetime, literally to the afterlife, to the Lord. First one, 20 unbelievable, beautiful years. A year in between, met my second wife, who just passed away 4 years ago. And the amount of what you just said, the kitchen with your wife, the amount of things. I was laying on bed one day, and it was as if like God was saying, it's time for your life review now, not when you go to the afterlife. And God showed me a big file of everything I said and did or didn't do that I understood at that moment how I hurt my beloved wife. And we had an incredible relationship. And the regret was just, wow, what the hell was wrong with me? So there's that duality there. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I've gotten to a place where I've come to understand how an entire species, see, because in a sense, I don't want to create excuses or a way out of acknowledging my own unfortunate behavior. But, when you're raised in a culture, and a global culture, where every message you receive, and now with the messages coming at us one every 30 seconds, with the
24/7 too.
that's my point.
Yeah.
So the messages that we are receiving from our culture run counter to the messages that our soul is sending us. And so, one almost can't be blamed in a manner of speaking. It's hard to blame myself for behaving in the way that my culture has taught me to behave. So what we have to do is write a new cultural story. And that's easier said than done. So, but, I do think it's possible. I do think we're getting there. Now we're told that, millions upon millions of people, or they're telling us now around 15 million people have read Conversations with God. And that's not a small number of people. And if we could get all the people who have come to a new understanding of who we are and why we're here, if we can get all those people to join together in some kind of collaborative, cooperative venture, such as we're doing right here, right now on this program.
Exactly.
Then if we can get more and more people to agree, let's become what are called in the book, The God Solution, they're called idea heroes.
Mm.
We need to create idea heroes. That is, people who are willing to stand up for, announce, declare, and express and live into an idea that we know ahead of time is going to be opposed by the largest number of people.
Right.
Galileo was, because God gave me this whole idea, of course, and I said to God, what do you mean by idea heroes? And God said, Galileo was an idea hero, just to give you an example that everyone will understand. Because it was Galileo who said, I think in 1623, that the Earth revolved around the sun.
Yeah.
And in the year 1623, that was a very unpopular idea, because the church taught that the sun revolved around the Earth.
Yeah, it was heresy back then.
It was absolute. Not only was it heresy, Galileo was condemned and he was condemned by the church. And so he nevertheless stuck by his word. He said, no, I'm sorry. The earth revolves around the sun and the church is wrong. It took the church only 325 years
to figure it out.
To admit its error. I think it figured it out earlier, but it took them a long time to admit publicly, okay, we were wrong. Galileo was right.
Yeah.
And they reversed their decision to condemn Galileo.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's just so many stories like that. You mentioned in God Talk.
Gloria Steinem, excuse me for interrupting.
That's all right.
Gloria Steinem is another idea hero. She said a few years back, wait a minute, women should earn the same salary that men earn when they perform the same function and do it just as efficiently. And this business that a man should make more money than a woman simply because he's male needs to end. And Gloria Steinem, God bless her, created equal pay for women.
Wow.
Harvey Milk is an idea hero. Harvey Milk was a supervisor on the board of supervisors in the city of San Francisco, and he ran for mayor of San Francisco on a platform that included legalizing gay marriage. Because Harvey Milk said, wait a minute, a man should be able to, if a man is in love with another man and they form a relationship that you would call a marriage, shouldn't he, if the other man is in the hospital in the critical care unit, and they only allow members of one's immediate family?
At that time. Wow.
Yeah. So he created a law that said, wait a minute. Why can't people of the same gender be married? And certainly a person who is married to another person should be able to go in and in the critical care unit and visit his beloved other, and shouldn't be stopped from doing so simply because they're the same sex. Come on, grow up, humanity.
Yeah.
So Harvey Milk was another idea hero, as was Martin Luther King Jr., who said, oh, I have an idea. How about the color of a person's skin should not determine how we treat them in terms of the civil rights that they should be accorded? And so there have been many idea heroes who have stepped forward and said, I know that you don't agree in largest numbers, but this is what I believe is true. And that's where we need to now go in our thoughts about God. Larry King asked me on his television show years ago. Larry said, okay, Mr. Walsh, you claim to be talking to God. What's God's message to the world? Oh, and it'd be great if you could do it. Tell us within 30 seconds, because we have only 30 seconds left.
Sounds like a got you question in his mind.
I thought, oh, come on. You could have asked me that question before the end of the interview.
Right.
But, God's had already told me God's most important message to the world. 5 words. You've got me all wrong.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
You've got me all wrong. I am not a punishing, condemning, judging God. I am a God of pure love. And sadly, the human species can't even imagine even the highest power in the universe being a deity of pure love that judges, condemns, and punishes no one.
That's why at the beginning of our conversation, I talked about the quote unquote God of the Bible that instructed and was responsible for killing 2 or 3 or 4 million people. That can't be true.
No, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, even though it's in the Bible, is not in fact a quotation or an instruction from God. And God, and that was one of the great revelations that I received in my conversation with God. God said to me, I don't command anyone. I've never have commanded anyone. And I said, well, wait a minute. What about the 10 Commandments? God said, the 10 Commandments, who would I command? You're all a part of me. Would the left hand slap the right hand for disobeying? I mean, who would I command? There are no... I said, well, then what are the 10 Commandments? God said, no. Those weren't 10 Commandments. Those were 10 commitments. And people simply misunderstood or deliberately misinterpreted. Those were 10 commitments. And Moses came to the mountaintop asking God, how can I tell my people that they're on the pathway to a higher civilization, the pathway to divinity? Give me some signs. And God said to Moses, okay, I make these are 10 commitments. You can tell you can tell your people that God said to you that when you're on the pathway to God, you won't lie. You shall not lie. You shall not commit adultery. There are many things you simply will not do anymore because the highest part of you would not make those kinds of choices.
Yeah, you're on your path to divinity at that point. You wouldn't organically just do that.
And so Moses came down from the mountaintop and shared with his people that God had committed to him that these are sure and certain ways to know that you're on the pathway to demonstrating your divinity. Because when you're demonstrating divinity, you simply shall not do these things. But people heard them as commandments.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You make another point. Why can making a conscious choice to ask a higher power for help be a huge turning point in our own personal path towards divinity, as compared to just allowing it to happen, making a conscious choice and decision, because you're actually at that point inviting God into your life, is the way I'm understanding what you're saying.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that when we ask God for help, what we're doing is, number one, acknowledging that there's a source other than us in the universe, and a source that's simply waiting. Because my understanding is God will never, never, never enter our lives simply because God wants to.
Yeah, because he would violate our free will, which apparently he gave us.
That's exactly right.
Right.
It's exactly where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
So God says, no, that's not my idea of pure love. Pure love would only want for you what you want for you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that, then you will understand what pure love is about. But, it took me one failed relationship after the other. I've realized that most human beings can't even love the person on the pillow next to them in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
How many of us can say to our beloved wife, "I want for you only what you want for you,"
mm-hmm.
even if what you want for you is something that I don't want for you and don't
Right.
want for me.
Mm-hmm.
Only after one failed relationship and one failed marriage after the other have I found a way to turn to my present wife. We've been together now 17 years and been able to say to her, I only want for you what you want for you. I don't want for you what I want for you. If I want for you what I want for you, I'm not loving you, I'm loving me. I'm simply using you as an instrument through which I can love me. But when I can look at you and say, you know what? I only want for you what you want for you.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting if God's going to send me, it's in the cards, a third soulmate. Because I've had two 20-year beautiful relationships, and what I've learned is exactly what you just said. I can't wait to be able to do what you just said to whoever might be my new soulmate. I think about that all the time. I can't wait. And I know it's in the cards. I can just feel it,
How old are you, John?
I'm 77.
Ah, okay. Still plenty of time.
Yeah, still plenty of time. And when I lost my second wife 3.5 years ago, I was pretty devastated. But the amount of growth and walking towards my divinity that's occurred in the last 3.5 years, I know that's part of God's plan. Not saying he wants people to die or lose their body or anything like that, but I know the growth and the path that I have taken because of her loss wouldn't have happened at this accelerated race without that. So it must have been a pre-birth agreement, script. I'm not sure, but I'm rolling with it. What's that favorite song? You got to roll with it, baby. And I'm excited. I'm back into my life, and I would have never thought. I mean, I've not given up my jazz and music career, but now since my book, The Invisible Architect, came an Amazon #1 bestseller in the area of metaphysics, it's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Almost like you. I didn't sell 10 million, but the point is, what's a jazz guy doing? Write a book uh, in metaphysics that becomes a number one bestseller, that's not an accident. I don't believe in coincidences. God told me to write this book. And like you, I've pretty much almost channeled it or dictated it or paid attention to it, the download, and look what happened. So now in my new part of my race here, in my twilight years, I'm more involved into that kind of thing. And I would never have thought 30 years ago when hearing your book, I'd be sitting here talking to you, one of the premier disseminators of God and interacting with God. So it's pretty amazing how God works in interesting ways, you know?
Yes, and but I do want to suggest that, in my understanding, God does not have a plan. I heard you say it's part of God's plan. My understanding is, because I asked God about that, and God said, Neale, I don't have a plan for every single one of the sentient beings in the cosmos.
Right.
I didn't sit down and decide that, let's see, when Neale Donald Walsh is 33 years old, he's going to fall down the steps and break his ankle.
Right. Yeah.
That wasn't part of my plan for you. So I don't have a plan. I have a desire, but not a plan.
Mm-hmm.
My desire is that you would experience that you have free will to create your personal reality in the way that you choose. I want for you what you want for you.
And there's the ultimate thing we just talked about, like just with your wife. God wants that for us, and he gives us the free will. And he doesn't bypass our free will, but our experiences, I kind of almost think, though, various experiences could possibly be stimulators or catalyze us into growing and walking towards.
Oh, there's no question about that.
But I mean, in advance, could it be that before one incarnates, various types of experiences were possibly discussed so you could use your free will to grow and walk towards your divinity? What do you think about that concept?
I don't have an answer to that. I don't. That's a very good idea, very good question, and I don't have an answer one way or the other on that.
Mm-hmm.
It could very well be that way. For all I know, that's exactly how it could be.
Yeah, they say, my research has said that God knows itself. This is interesting. I had a realization on this by expressing its perfection through us and our desires. I thought that's quite interesting. Part of me goes, well, wait a minute, God's all perfect, all knowing. What do you mean God knows itself? Well, if you think about, like me as a composer, every time I write a composition and release it, play it, I know more about my writing and composing and about who I am. It's probably like a parent who has kids learns more about their parenting and who they are by bringing children into the world and helping them survive better. So what do you think about God expressing its perfection through our desires?
I think that's an interesting idea. And I think that it could very, very well be precisely how life works.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing here that, because I got to keep us down to a certain time. You said at the end, I think it was, because I've read all your books, what is needed on earth now is a civil rights movement
for the soul.
For the soul. I love that phrase and expression. Elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I was told that that's what we need, a civil rights movement for the soul, freeing humanity at last from the idea that God demands things of us and punishes us if we do not do as God demands. We need a civil rights movement for the soul.
I love that.
Yeah, and I by the way, I tried to create a movement like that, which is called Humanity's Team, and I did create an organization called Humanity's Team, which now has membership in every country of the world, including China. Yes, China, Russia. And there are personal representatives of humanity's team in every one of those countries, sharing the messages of oneness. That the single message that would change our cultural story is the message that would end the idea that we're separate somehow from each other, and somehow separate from that which we call God. That separation does not exist at any level.
Well, remember the book by James Redfield, Celestine Prophecy?
Yes, I do recall.
And it's about a guy that was bored, disillusioned with life, and he hears about some manuscript that was written in Peru about had different insights. And one of the things that, of course, it was a fiction book, but it sort of was didactic, spiritually in nature. And Redfield says that, I wanted to get the quote right, where is that? Redfield states that we have been disconnected from the large, just what you said, we have been disconnected from the larger source of dynamic universal energy that sustains us and responds to our expectations. Redfield himself said this book delves into self-discovery, synchronicity, and the interconnectedness of all things. And if you take a look, Jesus says, I and the Father are one. And there's an author that's one of my favorite authors, Thomas Troward, who's a New Thought author, wrote a book called The Hidden Power. And he says, the ultimate truth is, I am the person thou art, and thou art the person that I am, which ties all this together. He said, if you can alternate between those two viewpoints, you have reached the basic truth. And you talk about that in God Talk and how we're all one and how we're not separate. So
it was the very first message in the very first Conversations with God dialogue that I had. The very first message in what became the first book. It's in the first 22 pages of 3,000 pages, where God said, Neale, all things are one thing. There is only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is.
Yeah, you talk about the spiritual I'm just remembering, oceanic wave concept, where the ocean and the wave.
Yeah, the wave is not separate from the ocean. It's simply an individual.
That's in this book. Yeah, exactly.
It's simply an individual expression of the ocean. And when that individual expression is complete, the wave recedes back into the ocean whence it came.
Exactly.
Appreciated very much the chance to see you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. God bless you for all your work. Okay, Neale?
Okay, my friend.
Godspeed. Ciao.
This concludes this week's podcast with the jazz philosopher, John Novello. To learn more about John, visit his website at johnnovelloauthor.com, or to schedule a one-on-one consultation with John, visit go.johnnovelloauthor.com/register. See you next week.